Elias Thorne stood at the edge of the platform, staring at the tower. It floated in space like a dark scar, orbiting a dying star that cast an orange glow over its black metal walls. Smoke curled from cracks along its surface, and flames flickered through broken windows. No one had dared enter it for years. Not humans, not aliens. Everyone said it was cursed, dangerous, and impossible to survive. But Elias did not listen to fear. He had a job, a duty, and a choice. He was a security officer, but more than that, he was human. And humans sometimes did things no one else dared. Reports had come in days ago. A young dragon, bioengineered but alive, was trapped inside the tower. Its life signs were faint, almost gone. No one else would risk their lives. Not the government crews, not the mercenary teams. They all turned away. But Elias could not. He remembered the first time he saw a dragon in person. Even just one glance at its glowing scales and bright eyes had filled him with awe. They were creatures of wonder, and he could not abandon one in danger. "Captain Thorne," said a voice over his comms. It was Lieutenant Mara, his supervisor. "You don't have to do this. No human has survived that place. Step back. This is not worth it." Elias adjusted his helmet and replied calmly, though his heart raced. "I know the risks, Lieutenant. But I can't leave it there. Someone has to try. That dragon doesn't have a choice." "I do." There was silence on the other end. Elias could almost hear her sigh. She knew he would not change his mind. Humans were stubborn, sometimes foolish, but that stubbornness could also be courage. The tower was massive. Its metal walls were scorched, bent, and broken. Flames leapt from fissures in the structure, and smoke stung Elias's eyes even behind his helmet. Sensors in his suit beeped constantly, warning him of heat levels that would melt ordinary armor. But Elias was not ordinary. He had trained for situations like this, and he had survived worse. He activated his jetpack and hovered closer. Every step he took was careful. Loose debris floated in zero gravity, some pieces glowing red-hot from the tower's fire. The heat was intense, but Elias focused on the dragon. Its life signs showed a tiny pulse inside the deepest section of the tower. That pulse was fragile, weak, but it was there. It called to him. As he entered the tower, the corridors were dark, smoke-filled, and twisted. Fire licked along the walls, and sparks flew from exposed circuits. The air was thick with heat and the smell of burning metal. Every sound echoed strangely. The tower was unstable. He could feel it shaking beneath him, metal groaning like it was alive and angry. He moved slowly, checking each corridor, each room. His sensors picked up heat spikes, falling debris, and weak life signs. The dragon's heartbeat was almost gone. Elias swallowed hard. Time was running out. At one point, a massive beam fell from above. Elias rolled to the side, narrowly avoiding being crushed. He cursed under his breath but pressed on. The dragon needed him, and there was no room for fear. He thought about why he was doing this. It wasn't just bravery. It wasn't glory. It was something deeper. Humans sometimes had a spark inside them, a drive to protect others, even when it was dangerous. Even when everyone else turned away. That spark burned in Elias now, guiding him forward. The tower seemed endless, a maze of fire and metal. Each step felt heavier than the last, but Elias refused to stop. He climbed ladders scorched by fire, crawled through vents, and jumped across broken platforms. Smoke choked him, heat burned him, but he pressed on. Finally, he reached a wide hall. The fire here was less intense, and he could see a small shape trapped under a fallen beam. It was the dragon. Its scales were silver, reflecting the firelight. Its eyes were half closed, weak, but alive. It made a small, pitiful sound, like a child crying in pain. Elias's heart ached. He knelt beside it, feeling the heat radiating from its body. "I've got you," he whispered. I'm here now. You're not alone. He carefully lifted the beam, using all his strength. Smoke stung his eyes, metal creaked, and the tower trembled as if it could collapse at any moment. But the dragon's small head lifted, looking at him with hope. Its pulse was weak but steady. Elias smiled, even though he knew this was far from over. He had reached the dragon, and he had a chance to save it. The rest of the tower, the fire, the danger, all of it was still ahead. But for now, he had taken the first step. And humans, he thought, sometimes did the impossible. Elias tightened his grip on the dragon, feeling the heat radiate from its fragile body. Every step he took was careful. The tower beneath them groaned and shook as if it wanted to crush anyone who dared enter. Smoke filled the corridors, curling around his helmet and making each breath heavy. The dragon whimpered softly, small wings trembling, and Elias whispered, "It's okay, I've got you. Just hold on." The sensors in his suit screamed warnings about heat spikes and structural weaknesses, but he ignored them. He had faced dangerous missions before, but nothing like this. This tower was alive with fire and chaos. Sparks rained from broken panels, and every metal floor vibrated with danger. Elias moved slowly, testing each step before committing, carrying the dragon as carefully as possible. As he entered a wider hall, the walls around him buckled and twisted. Flames licked at the ceiling, and molten metal dripped like fiery rain. A loud crash echoed through the tower as a large piece of debris fell nearby. Elias dropped to one knee, shielding the dragon with his arm. His heart pounded. One wrong move could mean death, for both of them. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath behind his helmet. He studied the dragon. Its silver scales were scorched in some places, but its glowing eyes still held a faint spark of life. He had to keep it alive until they reached safety. If he failed, no one else would ever forgive themselves, or him. Humans might be reckless sometimes, but this was more than courage. This was survival, responsibility, and a choice that no one else dared to make. Elias scanned the corridor ahead. A large fire blocked the path, flames roaring like angry beasts. He activated his suit's cooling system and carefully hovered closer, using small jets to move over burning debris. The dragon clung to him, small claws gripping his armor, trusting him completely. Trust. Elias felt a strange warmth in his chest. Even in the worst of danger, trust could give a human strength no fire could burn away. A sudden tremor shook the tower, and part of the ceiling collapsed ahead of them. Elias dove to the side, rolling over molten metal. He hissed as his gloves brushed against burning debris. The dragon let out a small cry, and Elias hugged it closer, whispering, "I've got you. You're safe with me." But he knew that safety was fragile here. The tower could collapse at any moment. He reached a narrow corridor, the walls bent and blackened. Sparks flew from broken conduits, and smoke nearly blinded him. He used his hand to guide the dragon, moving inch by inch. His suit beeped warnings about heat overload, but Elias ignored them. He had made it this far, and he would not turn back now. The dragon's faint heartbeat was a rhythm he could not ignore. It told him there was still life worth fighting for. As they moved deeper, Elias noticed strange shadows moving along the walls. The tower was not empty. Automated defense drones, long abandoned, now flickered to life. They hovered, sparking and buzzing, scanning for intruders. Elias cursed under his breath. He couldn't fight them all while carrying the dragon. He had to think fast. He remembered the old maintenance panels he had passed earlier. Using his suit's interface, he hacked a nearby control unit, sending a false signal to the drones. They paused, confused, then turned away. Elias exhaled, relief mixing with the heat. Just a little further, he whispered to the dragon. "We'll make it." Suddenly, a massive section of the floor beneath them cracked. Elias barely jumped to a nearby beam, holding the dragon tight against him. Sparks and fire erupted from the gap below. He slid across the metal, his gloves burning, but he kept moving. Every step was a fight against the tower itself. Every second counted. The dragon's weak breathing reminded him that failure was not an option. For a brief moment, Elias thought about giving up, about stepping back and letting the dragon die. But he could not. Human courage was not just bravery, it was doing the right thing when no one else could. He had made a promise in his heart, and he would keep it, no matter the cost. The corridor twisted sharply, leading to a massive chamber. Smoke and flames poured from the far end, but Elias could see a faint glow, the exit route the sensors had marked. He hugged the dragon closer, feeling its fragile body shiver against his chest. "Almost there," he said softly. "Just a little more." Suddenly, another tremor shook the tower, stronger than before. A massive beam fell, narrowly missing them. Elias stumbled but stayed upright. The dragon chirped nervously, and Elias whispered soothing words, feeling the weight of its tiny life in his arms. One wrong step now, and they would both be lost. Finally, they reached a small platform that led toward a safer passage. Elias paused for a moment, catching his breath. Smoke burned his eyes, heat seared his skin, and exhaustion clawed at his body. But the dragon's eyes looked at him with trust, and that gave him strength. Humans, he realized, could face impossible odds when someone depended on them. He took a step forward, then another, moving steadily toward safety. The fire roared behind them, the tower moaning and cracking, but Elias held the dragon tight, refusing to give in. This was more than survival. This was courage, determination, and hope. And humans, he thought, could sometimes do the impossible when it mattered most. Elias paused at the edge of the platform, sweat dripping from his helmet. The dragon shivered in his arms, weak and frightened. The tower behind them groaned like a wounded giant. Every step they had taken so far had been dangerous, but now the real challenge began. The reactor core at the heart of the tower was unstable, and the slightest movement could trigger an explosion. He scanned the chamber ahead. Flames erupted from the walls, and molten metal spilled like rivers of fire. Sparks flew through the air, landing dangerously close. The dragon lifted its small head, eyes glowing faintly. Elias whispered, "We can make it. I promise." He could feel its fragile heartbeat against his chest, like a tiny drum of hope. The corridor twisted sharply downward. Debris littered the floor, some pieces still hot enough to burn through his gloves. Elias carefully placed each step, feeling the tower shake beneath him. Every vibration reminded him how fragile life could be. The dragon let out a soft, pitiful cry. "Shoo, it's okay," he said. "We're almost there." As they moved forward, Elias noticed movement along the walls, shadows flickering in the smoke. Automated defense drones, damaged but still active, hovered silently, scanning for intruders. They sparked and buzzed, their sensors focused on any movement. Elias froze for a moment, knowing that one wrong step could trigger an attack. He looked around quickly. There was a maintenance panel nearby, cracked and half-burned. Using his suit interface, he hacked the panel, sending a false signal to the drones. The machines paused, confused, then floated away into the smoke. Elias exhaled, relief mixing with tension. "Good," he muttered. "We're still alive." A sudden tremor shook the chamber. A large piece of ceiling collapsed behind them, sending fire and sparks raining down. Elias rolled, shielding the dragon with his arm. The heat was intense, and smoke filled his helmet. His eyes watered, but he could not stop now. He gritted his teeth and continued, one careful step at a time. The dragon's breathing grew more labored. Elias realized that it might not survive much longer if he did not act quickly. His heart ached, but he pushed fear aside. Humans sometimes had to face impossible odds to save life. That was what made them extraordinary. That was why he had come here. He reached a narrow bridge that spanned a pit filled with molten metal. The bridge was cracked and unstable. One false move, and both of them would fall. Elias hugged the dragon close, feeling its tiny body tremble. He moved slowly, testing the floor beneath each step. Sparks flew from broken conduits, and the heat nearly burned through his gloves. But he kept going, whispering encouragement to the dragon. Almost there. Just a little more. Suddenly, a burst of fire erupted from the reactor core below. The blast shook the bridge violently. Elias stumbled, nearly losing his footing. The dragon squealed in panic, and he held it tighter. His heart pounded. He could not let it go, not now. Humans were capable of extraordinary things when they had to be. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. He remembered the safety corridor marked on his sensors, a path to a small chamber that could shield them from the fire. But it was across the most dangerous part of the bridge. Elias took a deep breath, steadying himself. He would not fail. He could not fail. He had made a promise. Step by step, he moved forward, holding the dragon close. Flames licked the edges of the bridge, and sparks rained down like tiny meteors. His gloves scorched, his suit overheating, but he ignored it all. The dragon's life depended on him. That was enough to push past fear, past pain, past exhaustion. Halfway across, a section of the bridge cracked beneath them. Elias dropped to one knee, rolling to avoid falling debris. The dragon chirped in fear. "I've got you," he whispered. "Hold on." Using every ounce of strength, he lifted both himself and the dragon over the broken section and landed on the other side. He paused to catch his breath. Sweat dripped into his eyes, and the heat burned his skin, but the dragon's faint heartbeat reminded him of why he was here. Life was fragile, but it was worth fighting for. He looked at the chamber ahead, the safety corridor glowed faintly, just a few meters away. Elias stood up, gripping the dragon firmly. He took a final deep breath and sprinted across the last section of the bridge. Flames erupted behind him, the tower shaking violently. Sparks rained down, but he did not stop. He reached the corridor and slid inside, shielding the dragon from the fire. For a moment, there was silence. The heat was still intense, but the worst of the fire was behind them. The dragon curled up in his arms, exhausted, but alive. Elias let out a shaky breath. He looked around the chamber. There was still danger, but he had made it this far. He whispered to the dragon, "You're safe now, for the moment." The creature looked up at him, eyes glowing faintly, and let out a soft, trusting chirp. Elias smiled despite his exhaustion. Humans could be brave. Humans could be strong. And sometimes, humans could do the impossible. The tower still groaned and shook, threatening to collapse at any moment. But Elias knew he had passed the hardest part. He had reached the dragon, and for now, that was enough. He would fight for it until the end, no matter what came next. Humans never gave up. Humans never abandoned hope. And as he held the dragon close, Elias knew one thing for certain: life, no matter how small or fragile, was always worth risking everything for. Elias felt the tower shake violently as he stepped into the narrow corridor. Flames licked the walls, molten metal dripping like rivers of fire. Every sensor in his suit screamed warnings, but he ignored them. He could not stop. The dragon in his arms was weak, its breathing shallow, and time was slipping away. The chamber ahead was worse than anything he had imagined. Sparks flew from broken conduits, and the floor was cracked in several places. One wrong move, and they could fall into the inferno below. Elias hugged the dragon tighter, feeling its tiny heart beating against his chest. Its life depended entirely on him. Suddenly, a massive tremor shook the tower. A section of the ceiling collapsed behind him, sending fire and debris raining down. Elias barely dodged a falling beam, rolling across the floor and shielding the dragon. His gloves were scorched, his suit nearly overheated, but he pressed on. Humans were capable of extraordinary things, he reminded himself. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. He reached a fork in the corridor. One path led toward the main exit, but it was blocked by a raging firestorm. The other led to a maintenance shaft that could give him a chance to escape, but it was narrow and unstable. Elias studied the options quickly. There was no safe choice, only the one that gave the dragon a chance. He took a deep breath and headed for the maintenance shaft. The walls of the shaft were hot to the touch, and sparks flew from exposed wires. Elias had to duck under hanging debris, twisting and turning through tight spaces while holding the dragon close. The creature let out a small, frightened cry, and he whispered, "I've got you. We'll get through this." The words gave him strength, even as exhaustion clawed at his body. A sudden roar shook the tower. The reactor core was unstable now, the heat intense enough to melt steel. Flames shot through cracks in the walls, and the floor beneath him trembled. Elias realized that to save the dragon, he would have to risk everything. The corridor ahead would collapse at any moment. If he failed, they would both die. He paused for a moment, heart pounding. Humans were not perfect, but they could do what no one else dared. He had come this far. He could not turn back. "Hold on," he whispered to the dragon. "I'm not leaving you." Elias sprinted forward, carefully balancing on a narrow metal beam over a molten pit. Sparks rained down, and heat burned through his suit, but he ignored it. One step at a time, he moved toward the exit. The dragon's claws dug into his armor, and he whispered words of comfort. They were alone in the heart of the inferno, but he would not fail. Halfway across, the beam beneath them cracked. Elias felt it shift under his weight. The dragon chirped in fear. Elias gritted his teeth and pressed forward, using every ounce of strength to keep both of them balanced. The metal bent and twisted, and he could feel it giving way. One more step, and they would be free. One more step, and he would have saved a life no one else dared to protect. Suddenly, a massive section of the ceiling began to fall. Elias dropped to one knee, rolling to shield the dragon. Sparks and molten metal rained down around them. He could feel his gloves burning, his suit alarms screaming, but he pushed through the pain. Humans could survive impossible odds when they had to. Humans could fight against the impossible. He stood again, gripping the dragon tightly. The exit was just a few meters away. Flames roared on both sides, and the floor beneath them cracked further. Elias felt exhaustion hitting him like a hammer, but he could not stop. The dragon's life was in his hands. His heart pounded, but he ran forward, leaping the final gap onto the safe platform. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the roar of the collapsing tower behind them. The dragon curled up in his arms, exhausted but alive. Elias's chest heaved with relief. He had done it. He had risked everything, and he had survived. But the tower was not finished. Another tremor shook the floor, and fire shot up from the molten pits. Debris fell around them, and Elias realized they still needed to get out. There was no time to rest. He lifted the dragon higher, running toward the next corridor. Sparks rained down, and flames licked at his suit. Every step was agony, but he pressed on. The dragon looked at him, eyes wide and trusting. Elias whispered, "Almost there. Just a little more." They reached a metal hatch that led to a small shuttle bay. The hatch was hot and warped from the fire, but Elias forced it open. He carried the dragon inside, shielding it from the heat. Finally, they reached the shuttle. Elias set the dragon down gently. The creature looked up at him, weak but alive, and chirped softly. Elias smiled through exhaustion. Humans could survive, humans could fight, and humans could protect what mattered most, even when the odds were impossible. As the shuttle lifted off, leaving the burning tower behind, Elias looked back. The tower collapsed entirely in a shower of fire and molten metal. Flames roared, sparks flew, and the smoke filled space, but the dragon was safe. And Elias knew something important. Sometimes, humans risked everything not for glory, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. The dragon chirped again, nuzzling his shoulder. Elias whispered, "We made it. We survived." Humans, he thought, could do the impossible when life depended on courage, hope, and the will to act. And in that moment, he understood something deeper. Life, no matter how small or fragile, was always worth risking everything for. The shuttle drifted quietly in space, leaving the burning tower far behind. Elias Thorne slumped in his seat, exhaustion weighing down every muscle. His gloves were scorched, his suit alarm still faintly screaming, and his heart pounded like a drum. But for the first time in hours, he allowed himself to breathe. The dragon lay curled in the corner of the shuttle, its silver scales dim in the soft interior light, chest rising and falling steadily. It was alive. Elias had done it. He looked down at the dragon, his eyes softening. "You made it," he whispered. "We both made it." The creature let out a small chirp, its eyes bright and trusting. Elias smiled, feeling a deep warmth he had not expected. Humans could do incredible things when they had to. They could survive against impossible odds, protect those who could not protect themselves, and face fear without turning away. The shuttle's comm crackled. Lieutenant Mara's voice came through, strained and panicked. "Elias? Are you alive? We saw the tower collapse. We thought." "I'm alive," Elias interrupted, his voice hoarse but steady. "And the dragon, it's alive too. I'm bringing it home." There was a long pause. Then Mara whispered, I can't believe it. You actually did it." Elias allowed himself a small laugh, shaky but genuine. "I told you, sometimes humans do the impossible." He looked at the dragon again. Its eyes seemed almost intelligent, as if it understood him. Somehow, he felt they shared something unspoken, a bond forged in fire, danger, and trust. As the shuttle approached the nearest colony, news of the burning tower and the dragon spread quickly. At first, people refused to believe it. No human had ever entered that tower and survived. No one had ever rescued a bioengineered dragon from certain death. But reports from the shuttle sensors, combined with Mara's confirmation, left them no choice. Elias Thorne had done the impossible. He landed the shuttle carefully, dragon still in his arms. Crowds gathered outside the landing bay, staring in awe at the exhausted human who had faced fire, collapsing metal, and death itself to save a creature that no one else would have dared to touch. Murmurs ran through the crowd. He risked everything, for a dragon? Humans can be brave like this? I can't believe he survived. Elias stepped down slowly, carrying the dragon gently to a secure holding area. Scientists and medical staff rushed forward to tend to the creature, checking its vital signs and ensuring it was unharmed. The dragon chirped softly, eyes flicking toward Elias, and he felt an unexplainable pride. It had trusted him. It had survived because of him. Later, as he sat in a quiet room, removing the soot and sweat from his suit, Elias thought about what had just happened. Humans were capable of incredible courage, yes, but sometimes it was more than courage. Sometimes it was choice, the choice to protect life, to face danger when no one else would, and to act when others turned away. That choice defined humanity, and he had made it today. A faint knock came at the door. Mara entered, expression serious but respectful. "Elias, the council wants to speak with you. They want to recognize what you've done." Elias shook his head. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was right. Because someone had to act. And, because that dragon needed me." Mara smiled faintly. "And because of that, humans everywhere will see what we can do. They'll be inspired." Outside the city, colonies on distant planets had already begun broadcasting his story. Children, scientists, and ordinary citizens watched in awe as footage from the shuttle showed the burned tower, the collapsed corridors, and the human who had risked everything to save a dragon. Messages poured in from across the galaxy. People wrote of courage, hope, and humanity's ability to rise above fear. Elias Thorne became more than a man, he became a symbol. The dragon, now fully stable, nuzzled Elias gently. Its silver scales glimmered faintly in the light, and its eyes seemed almost to glow with understanding. He reached out and touched its head. "You're safe now," he said. "No one can hurt you again." And in that quiet moment, Elias realized something important. Humans were more than fragile bodies and fleeting lives. They were courage, compassion, and action. They could face the impossible, fight against death itself, and choose hope when all else seemed lost. As the sun rose over the colony, casting golden light across the landing bay, Elias stood tall, the dragon at his side. People cheered, cameras flashed, and somewhere in the distance, the galaxy watched in awe. He had risked everything, and in doing so, he had shown the truth: when humans choose to act, no force in the universe could stop them. The dragon chirped softly, nuzzling him again, and Elias smiled. Humans had survived, humans had triumphed, and humanity's story was not over, it had only just begun. And so, in the glow of a new day, with a dragon by his side and the galaxy watching, Elias Thorne walked forward, carrying hope, courage, and proof that humans, against all odds, could do the impossible.